Decorated war veteran Anthony Aguilar attracted America's attention after returning from Gaza. The whistleblower turned congressional candidate is here to share his story, but not just his story, also policy solutions for North Carolina's 13th Congressional District. He joins me now. Thank you so much, Mr. Aguilar, for being on the program.
Thank you for inviting me, and I'm very appreciative, and I'm looking forward to the discussion today. So thank you.
How did a whistleblower decide to become a congressional candidate?
So looking back on the path, it feels organic now, but in the beginning, it was not something that I foresaw or something that I determined to be predetermined in my journey. I served in the Army for 25 years. I retired. I was very much focused on my retirement and a new chapter in life that did not include war, contracting, the Department of Defense, politics, government. I very much wanted to focus on potentially being a professor in higher learning, or focusing on more community work, not necessarily in the federal government. When I was recruited by GHF and UG Solutions to go to Gaza as a contractor, I went under the premise that we were there to help, that we were there to provide aid, alleviate suffering. We were there to do good. When it became clear to me that we were not there to do good, and it wasn't just a private contractor that was there to take advantage of starving Palestinians and to work hand in hand with the IDF for the continuation of a clear and present genocide. When I realized that the United States government, from the highest level of the State Department to the executive branch to congressmen, senators, and representatives, were involved in this planning and knew what was happening, one, I could not stay quiet about it. I could not stay as a bystander and not take some sort of action. And then on my journey of informing members of Congress, it became clear to me that so many in our Congress are complicit and compromised by various elements, whether it's financial, ethical, religious beliefs. Our Congress is compromised, and it's not focused on the American people. That became very clear to me, and I decided that rather than simply talk about it or complain about it, that I should step up and do something. So that's why I'm running. And as I look back on it now, of course, calling out atrocities and standing up for what's right should have an organic pathway into being a representative of the people, not a politician, but a representative of the people. And so that's why I'm running specifically for the House of Representatives, the U.S. Congress, and the House of Representatives for my district that I live in. So North Carolina District 13 is my district. I live here. I raise my children here. My children go to school in this district. I pay my taxes in this district, and I want to represent the people of my district the best way that I can at the federal level to make change. And I truly believe that change can begin with small origins, but it takes stepping up to make that change possible. So that's why I'm running, and that's why my activism and my speaking out against a genocide has organically led into my position as a representative, because they go hand in hand. Humanity goes hand in hand with the values of the American people. Doing what's right and not being complicit in genocide and not spending America's tax dollars on genocide and war should go right back to the people of our country. So that's why I'm representing my district, and that's why I'm representing the American people. And I'm stepping up and taking on that challenge and that responsibility, not as a politician, but as a representative of the people.
When You appeared on the Bad Faith podcast with Brianna Joy Gray. You said that Gaza broke you. In what ways did that experience break you?
It broke me in many ways, emotionally, mentally, but also in a sense of how I saw our government, not our countrymen, not America, but our government. When the weapons of war are used against civilians and the full onslaught of a military is used against women and children, and the implementation of that is paid for, sponsored by, underwritten by, and funded by the United States government, that is a problem. That is heartbreaking to see that the United States government is complicit in the things that I witnessed in Gaza. And people may say, oh, well, he doesn't know what he's talking about. I will assure everyone listening, I have fought in more war than practically anyone in this country. Having served 25 years in the Army, I have fought for the last quarter century in war, in all of the wars where the United States has put boots on the ground, from Somalia to Yemen to Syria to Iraq to Afghanistan, to places on the map and countries that most have never heard of, and more so deployments than most people in the military, to include almost every general officer. And what I witnessed in Gaza in terms of the depravity, the destruction, the violence against the civilian population, the targeting of women and children specifically, broke me in a sense of humanity. How can we do this? And on the 24th of May, when I entered Gaza for the first time through the Philadelphia corridor, which is the route that borders the Egyptian border, along which the Rafah crossing, which we've heard so much about, is located. And it's called the Rafah crossing because the city area that once was there that is now gone is the city of Rafah inside of Gaza. And as we drove to the distribution site in southern Khan Yunis through Rafah, the rubble that was piled up that you had to use a bulldozer to get through was once a neighborhood, was once a hospital, a school, a mosque, a playground where children played. And in the rubble, you could hear the voices of people that were trapped beneath tons of rubble, of which the Israeli government and the IDF were never going to recover and allow them to die. And those buildings were brought down with American bombs. And those bulldozers that you see bulldozing the land are provided by America, by Caterpillar Bulldozer, provided to the IDF with US tax dollars. It's all backed by America. So when I saw that and I witnessed Amir, the young boy, on the 28th of May when he was gunned down outside of Distribution Site 3, along with other unarmed civilians who were simply seeking food, or fathers that have to make a choice, a family, a mother and a father that have to make a choice. Do I stay here at home knowing that if I leave, my entire home is going to be destroyed? They're waiting to target it until I leave. And the food at the distribution sites in the South was simply bait. Do I starve to death, or do I leave my home to go and potentially get food and never come home? And fathers and mothers and family having to make those decisions to where their family members died of starvation, and a father carrying their child to a distribution site who died of starvation, a young child who isn't part of Hamas, who has no stake in this war, which I hesitate to even call a war, targeted by an army and backed by the United States. It broke me. It broke me as an American. It broke me mentally and emotionally to see what humans are capable of, but what the United States government specifically is backing, paying for, supporting, and is doing it knowingly. There is nothing that the Israeli military in Gaza is doing that the United States Army, the United States military, the United States government is not fully aware of. And it's heartbreaking.
In your view, what should America's relationship be with Israel today, considering the experience you had?
When I hear members of Congress who do not know what they speak say that Israel is our greatest ally, that's a lie. The American people should know that that is a lie. Israel's actions in the region are an existential threat to the United States. Israel's government and the existence of the current government is an existential threat to the United States. The United States should, just like any nation that acts in the way that Israel does, as a pariah state, we should sanction them. We should stop providing them munitions and weapons and F-35s and smart bombs and tank rounds and artillery rounds and bullets. We should stop backing them politically. We should stop providing them with endless amounts of taxpayer dollar. Over this past weekend, as a snowstorm hit most of the United States and people were without power and people are struggling every day to make ends meet, pay bills, the United States once again sent another $6.9 billion in military aid to Israel. And if you think about that, Israel has not allowed aid into Gaza. Israel continues to bomb the Gaza Strip and illegally encroach upon and force people out of the West Bank to build illegal settlements. And all of that's being done with our tax dollars that we pay to Israel with no accountability, and we do it while Americans are suffering. The United States should cut all aid to Israel, sanction Israel, hold Israel accountable for the genocide that it is conducting, and denounce Israel's position in the world as a dominant protector, so they like to call themselves, in the Middle East. Israel's existence and Israel's actions under the current government are an existential threat to the region and to the security of the United States, and our Congress, our president, should call it that and take action accordingly.
If elected, you're going to be working with members of Congress who clearly disagree with you on this issue. How would you work with people who completely oppose your views on this issue?
I think many members of Congress, if you were to go 4 to 5 months ago, you'd have more disagreement. I think we see more and more of members of Congress that once stood with the Israel First banner are slowly retreating from that position. Months ago, if you walked the halls of our Congress, lined with Israeli flags, banners, I stand with Israel, Israel first, you won't see that as much anymore. People are backing away from that position. And those that stand firm will soon realize that they are in a non-tenable position to govern or to have the support of their constituency. The world and America are waking up to the truth. My position, for those that disagree with the position of supporting Israel, I would simply work to present facts from someone that's been there, from someone that has seen it with their own eyes, from someone that has served in the military for 25 years and is aware of how the military-industrial complex flexes its influence into the region through the military and through our tax dollars. Most of what I have found for members of Congress, Senate and House, on the Hill, that have a position that they do, whether it's Israel first or we must back Israel in everything that they do, for many, it is simply not being aware. I use the word ignorance by its definition. They are ignorant as to what the truth is and what is actually happening and what our tax dollars go to fund. The use of offensive weapons. Why? The use of weapons and technology that is not served in a posture of defense, but in a posture of offense, not just against the Palestinians, but against their neighbors. So when people want to make the claim up in Congress, up in the government, where they make claims of, well, Hamas, Hamas, Hamas. I remind them, the United Nations General Assembly, backed by the United States and other members of the Security Council, in 1978 declared that occupied territories have the inherent right and obligation to defend themselves. They have an inherent right to defend themselves against occupation. And I think that there's so many members of Congress that they believe that the world started on October 7th, 2023. That is where the region, the tensions in the region began. And part of my obligation on the Hill as a representative is to educate, is to caucus, is to debate, is to bring resolutions to the floor that whether or not they get the support to pass, they bring awareness to the Congress, and they put Congress on notice that their constituents are now aware, that their constituents are now informed about what's going on. So a large part of it being in Congress, no one congressman has the ability to change law. It's impossible. But through the strength of those that inform, that bring facts, that bring energy, that aren't afraid to back down from the truth because they're compromised by investments in the military-industrial complex, or they're compromised by foreign influence like AIPAC or any PAC for that matter. We need congressmen that are independent of super PACs and lobbyists and investments in the military-industrial complex who will stand on truth and represent the facts. Many in Congress are afraid to do that, not because of their conscience, but because they're compromised. And I think that paradigm is shifting. We're seeing that shift. And by the time I get to Congress next year, I plan to capitalize on that shift of that paradigm shift to inform people that, yes, the worst of what we thought is true. And we can either work to represent our nation and our constituents and our citizens, regardless of their race, ethnicity, or religious background, or we can side with a foreign government and continue to tear our country apart for apartheid and genocide. So I'll stand on the truth, and I will not be compromised or complicit by any ulterior motives.
Before we get to your veterans platform and your housing platform, what should, as someone who has fought in war and been in combat, what should America's role be internationally?
Well, I think the United States has so much to offer internationally in terms of economy, diplomacy, technology, humanitarian work. And the United States should be looking for opportunities to partner with regional actors instead of being at war with everyone. The United States, it's apparent to me, is on a quenchless thirst for resources, oil, minerals, land, power, and it does us no good. The United States should be in a position of leading the way in diplomacy, finding peaceful solutions to conflict before it arises, rather than being the antagonizer behind conflict. I hold no misgivings, nor do I in any way not understand that we, the United States, will not always agree or support the political motives or the ruling ways of other countries. However, I think we have seen from decades of conflict and war that when we try to fight our way through change, it fails. Ask me how I know. Afghanistan, Syria, Iraq, the southern Philippines, where for years we backed and upheld a treacherous warlord who eventually became the president. And I'm talking about Duterte, who by no means made the Philippines a peaceful or a better partner, because we tried to effect change through war, and war. What I remind everyone is that every nation yields 4 critical powers: diplomacy, information, their military, and the economy. It's called DIME. And in that, the United States once led the world in the big D, diplomacy, and the economy. And now we have put diplomacy, information, and the economy in the back seat, and we are leading with the military, which only leads to failure and only leads to greater threats against us as a nation. The United States' role should be to lead in diplomacy, to lead in efforts to bring about cooperative agreements, not only in Europe, but in Southeast Asia and Central Asia, to partner with regional partners for where we do have common ground and where we can make the world safer, better, more technologically advanced in a responsible way. Can you imagine, rather than using drones across the world as weapons of war, if we use them to navigate the seas or to help navigate natural resources and how to be more responsible here on our planet? The possibilities are endless, and the United States could and should be a leader in that.
Let's go into further in your policy platform, veterans. You want to end veteran homelessness. How did veteran homelessness explode, and what is the remedy for veteran homelessness?
Being a veteran myself, and a veteran who, when I retired, went through that what I call the dark gap, the dark period, is where most veterans get lost, left behind, or forgotten. And I'll explain that very clearly. As a veteran, when I leave the service or whether I retire, either or, I do 5 years, I transition out of the military, or I do 20 years and I retire and I transition out of the military. Whether you retire or you separate after a certain period of time, the process is largely the same. Now, when you leave service, your care for those that need that lifelong care because of injury or wounds or injury or a disability. Once you first get out, for 30 days, you're kind of in a dark zone because by law, the VA cannot start your care and start your benefits, but the military no longer covers your benefits. So you're in this dark space. I'll give a clear example of that for me when I first retired. Part of my retirement process, I was diagnosed with certain disabilities that I needed continuous care for. And that care dropped during that 30-day window, and I was left without care. And I had a medical incident that, because of my lack of care, that put me in the hospital. And it wasn't because I didn't follow suit with medical care. It's because it wasn't available. And that happens to every veteran leaving service in that period of time, where in that window of time we see is the heightened risk of suicide or substance abuse. That point in time when you're transitioning from an organization that was once your culture and identified who you were, and now you're just left to be. And that can be fixed very easily, can be fixed with simply a change in policy. And the reason the policy will not be changed is because the Veterans Affairs position is, well, we're a different organization. We get our money through a different pot of money. We can't cover that. DOD is supposed to cover that. Well, and the DOD says, well, we get funded through a different pot of money. We shouldn't be covering that. You should be covering that. And who gets stuck in the middle? The veteran. That's one way right there that we can make instant change through a very easy House resolution and policy to the VA that can change that within 1/4 of legislation. We can also look at another example, and many veterans or those in service know this, that when you serve in vicinity of a military base, Fort Bragg, where I'm at, or let's say Fort Lewis, Washington, near Seattle, or Fort Benning, Georgia, near Columbus, Georgia, it is known by all, and the economy is driven by it in that area, that based on your basic allowance for housing, the rental market in the area will rise to meet that, even though it's above the quality of living that is provided. And then you can't find anywhere to live below that threshold. And that amount is still taxed within the service member's paycheck. So under the best circumstance, they're paying out of pocket. Under the worst circumstance, they can't afford a place to live. That's active duty. I hope that most Americans realize that there are a large portion of active duty soldiers who live below the poverty line. If you go into the military and you're married and you have a child, you don't live in the barracks. You're not living in the barracks. You want to live in a house? You can't even afford it because of the basic allowance for housing that you get is skyrocketed because of the basic allowance for housing that the rest of the service gets based on rank. You can't afford it. So it's not just veterans. It's also our active duty. And especially for veterans, when you are out, the time period that you have to wait to get your VA disability, if you even get it. Now the United States government and the VA are considering taking numerous scheduled items off of the disability protocols, which I think is criminal. And then when you look at the difficulty in sometimes getting jobs, like for me, when I retired from the military, I was 100% totally and permanently disabled. It is difficult to get a job in any field because you have to disclose that. So when they look at a potential candidate for a job, it's a lot harder to get employment, especially if you're a veteran that has been to war numerous times, who's been wounded and broken and just sacrificed for your nation. And these are easy issues to fix. It just takes the willingness. And where I could find these cuts I could take one work week with myself and a small staff and go through the entire National Defense Authorization Act, earmark every item and what budgetary line it goes to from any service, find redundancy, find waste, find fraudulence, find unnecessary costs, compile those costs, and bring a House resolution, or simply bring through executive order a proposal to move that money to Veterans Affairs. And in the year of execution, the fiscal year, you can do that. Our law allows it. We don't do it because we have representatives and senators that do not understand the process. They themselves have not lived it. But most importantly, they don't care. I care. Veterans, housing, affordability, a living wage, healthcare, childcare. That's what I'm worried about. Not lining the pockets of billionaires.
Let's talk about housing as a whole really quick, and then we'll get your final thoughts. You say on your campaign website, a home is a human right, not a stock portfolio asset. Some people, they live, breathe, eat, sleep real estate investments, and they may look at you on the campaign trail in your district and say, no, I also view a house as an asset class. What is your message to those voters?
Well, in terms of a dwelling or a place to live, security is a human right. Now, owning a home or owning real estate certainly is an asset and an investment, but as an individualized, privatized asset, when the profit becomes more important than the housing of people, that's the problem. You can be a real estate magnate or a home builder that builds entire neighborhood plots. There's nothing inherently wrong with that. What's wrong with it is that when real estate investors or real estate owners in areas intentionally drive that cost up to where it's unaffordable, to where, if you're paying more than 30% just to pay for the house you live in, whether it's rent, lease, or buying through a mortgage, you're living in an unaffordable situation when it comes to your housing. You shouldn't have to be spending more than 30%. But if you look at just in my district, and I know this is true in other districts throughout the United States, not just in my district, is that when the price per square foot of a house or the price per square foot of a rental property based on the artificial raising of that makes it unaffordable. We then have your average citizen who works hard, who can't afford a place to live. Or if they can, they're spending everything to put a roof over their head. Real estate magnates can still be wealthy and make money and make things affordable. What we're seeing is that the affordability has become to the point to where people are being slaved to the ownerships of their home, or they don't have a place to live. They live with family, or they live in a multi-family situation. And what I've seen, many of the folks that are here that are the big real estate magnates, it's not a matter of being wealthy. It's a matter of being wealthy beyond imagination, billionaires and trillionaires, and having control and power. Because we also know that the real estate, in terms of how you shape where people live, where people can live, you also then control the district in terms of the voting. And this district that I live in is an exact result of that real estate property gerrymandering that has reconstructed the entire district to move voters that would otherwise vote differently out of the district. So it's a reality, and I see it and I live it every day.
Every candidate whoever gets interviewed on this channel gets a final word to say. Anything you want to say? You want to plug your campaign website? The floor is yours.
Well, thank you. I really appreciate that. And, I am running for Congress, for U.S. Congress, North Carolina District 13. And you can find more information on how to volunteer, on information on my position on every one of my main policy goals and objectives, and learn more about me at aguilarforuscongress.com. All spelled out, aguilarforuscongress.com. And in there, you'll see opportunities to help, whether it's donating, whether it's volunteering your time, whether it's helping with phone calls, door knocking, events, town halls. My platform, my run, if you will, is people-powered grassroots. I am not taking money from lobbyists. I am not taking money from super PACs. I am not taking money from AIPAC. I am not taking money from any foreign entity, whether they disguise themselves as being here in the United States or not. I'm not taking money from any of them. I have no investment or portfolio or commitment to the military-industrial complex. I will tell everybody in my district and in America, as a candidate, I believe that any candidate running for Congress should be completely disconnected from any personal gain that possibly can come to their office. I have no investments, not in the stock market, not in trading, no day trades, no investments in the New York Stock Exchange, no Bitcoin, nothing. I have no investments, stocks, bonds, and I certainly have no investment stocks, bonds held in the military-industrial complex. I can speak as my own person, as a candidate, not worried about whether it's going to take money out of my pocket or put money into my pocket. I will not vote, nor will I do my work to the benefit or representation of companies and corporations and billionaires. I will work on the Hill every day, my sleeves rolled up, for every constituent in North Carolina District 13, and quite frankly, for America. That's my position. Grassroots, I'm here to serve. I think through 25 years of service in the military, I've demonstrated that I can serve, and I can serve honorably, and I can serve selflessly. And that's what I intend to do in Congress, to serve selflessly and to serve honorably and to put Americans first.
Mr. Aguilar, that is the end of the interview. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you for your time, and I appreciate it.